Hi, welcome to our daily encounter. In Luke chapter 22, we have Jesus getting ready to partake of the Passover meal. And this is the night before he is going to be crucified. And he's wanting to share this Passover meal with his disciples in this upper room. And he tells Peter and John, "Go and prepare the Passover for us so that we may eat it." And this is something that Jesus was really looking forward to. As a matter of fact, in verse 15, he says, "I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." And so he wants Peter and John to go ahead and to find a place, to prepare the place, to get everything ready for them to be able to enjoy this meal together before he is crucified. Now, we read about this statement, go prepare the Passover that we may eat of it, and we think, okay, well, they're just going to go and maybe just kind of get the room clean, maybe lay out a few items, and that's it. There's not a whole lot to it. But when we go back and look historically at what actually went on in preparing the Passover meal, we find a totally different story. We see that this took an immense amount of preparation in a very short amount of time. For one, they had to find a place to prepare it. It says one historian estimated that 2.7 million people would have came to the festival in that little city of Jerusalem. 2.7 million. Now that might be a little of a generous. That might be on the generous end, and the more moderate estimates put it at about 200,000. But in either case, that's a lot of people to come into one city at one time and trying to share space together. But Jesus gives them the instructions on how to obtain it. Now they were going to see this guy carrying water pots and so on and so forth. And Jesus was already had the place picked out. They just had to go out and get it. But then they had to prepare the place. It wasn't just enough to go follow Jesus' instructions to find it. They had to prepare it. And this required them meticulously removing every little speck of leaven from the room and taking it out and then burning it. Don't know whether there was already furniture there. Most likely there probably was. They didn't have to worry too much about furniture. But they might have had to fill up the water pots that were there. Remember, Jesus washes their feet, and they might have needed to fill up the water pots. Who knows? But I think we can kind of imagine the fact that they had to probably do at least a few things to get the actual room prepared. But then they also had to prepare the food. And there was quite a bit of food preparation that had to take place. They had to either make or purchase the matzo, or what we call the unleavened bread. And then there would typically be a stack of 3 of these with the napkin folded over. But they would have had to prepare this or buy it and then lay it out on the table. There was a fruit and nut paste that had to be prepared. There was a raw vegetables and a tart dressing that would also go together in this meal. They would have the bitter herbs, which is specifically mentioned in Exodus chapter 12, that was supposed to go with the Passover meal. Also, the wine. During this Passover meal, they would have 4 glasses of wine set out. 1 for the cup of sanctification, 1 for the cup of judgment, 1 for the cup of redemption, and 1 was called the cup of praise. And so, if you remember, Jesus would take one of those cups and relate it to the cup of that it was the blood of his covenant. And so anyways, they had to get those out. And then you had the preparation of the lamb, which is probably the most involved part of this whole process. Now the lamb or the goat would have already been picked out. This would have happened on the 10th of this first month of the Jewish month. Here they are on the 14th, but they had to, it's already picked out, but they still had to take it to be sacrificed, and this would probably occur around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The family representative, in this case it was Peter and John, who were representing Jesus and his disciples, would slaughter it and then catch the blood in a basin. the priest would toss the blood at the base of the altar, and then the representative would skin the lamb and remove the fat and kidneys. And then that was to be placed on the altar to be burned. So that in itself is a pretty involved process. Anyone who is involved in hunting and stuff, if you ever skinned an animal, there's some labor involved. It would have been that way for them. And then once that was done, they would wrap the lamb back in the skin, place it over their shoulder, and carry it back to the place. And then it had to be, of course, roasted on a fire somewhere, usually outside somewhere. They would roast the lamb meat and get it prepared. And then all of this had to be done by 6 o'clock. So around 6 o'clock would have been the time when they actually began to eat the meal. So as you can see, a lot of preparation. They had to prepare they had to find a place. Of course, with Jesus' help, they find a place. They had to prepare that place. Then they had to prepare the food, and they had to prepare the lamb. Very involved, and something that they had to do with just a few hours time. But this is what they went through to be able to enjoy fellowship with their Savior, to be able to enjoy this this historical pastime with their leader, their teacher, and to share in this before he suffered. And that, of course, they didn't know the full implications and everything that was going to be going on in the next few hours, but they were prepared, and they were preparing to meet with the Lord. Now, the application for us, I think, is pretty obvious. That when we meet with the Lord, do we go through some effort to prepare? Now, for us, fortunately, we can spend time with the Lord. The Lord is so near us, we don't have to go through all this trouble to spend time with Him, to enjoy fellowship with Him. But it ought to be that we at least make some preparation in spending time with Him. And here I'm not talking about us spending fellowship with the Lord all day long. That's something that we do. It doesn't take much preparation. All that takes is really just turning our hearts to the Lord, praying to Him, and humbling ourselves before Him, and spending our day with that disposition, that attitude. But what I'm talking about here is when we have time that we're setting apart to especially spend time with the Lord, to enjoy fellowship with Him, to enjoy quiet time with the Lord, there ought to be some preparation that takes place. For one, if you're going to be spending time with the Lord, say in the morning time, making sure that you get to bed at a decent time, so that you can be awake, alert, and ready to spend time with Him. That takes some preparation, some thinking ahead. Also, you can prepare to meet with the Lord by having cut out enough time to spend with Him. Especially in the mornings, if your quiet time with the Lord is in the mornings, it's very easy for that morning time to shrinken, depending on how many times you hit the snooze button, or what all goes on in your morning, what type of hectic things happen that try to intrude on your time with the Lord. And try to eliminate those as much as possible. But then also in preparing, and maybe this is the most important thing, is in preparing our minds and our hearts to spend time with the Lord. It's not just enough to just stop and say, okay, well, I'm going to spend 15 minutes in my room by myself with the Lord, and just go through the motions, and it just becomes part of the routine. But to understand the significance of what you're doing, I'm about to spend time in the direct presence of Jesus Christ. And even though I can't see Him or touch Him or anything like that, I know He's just as real, and He's there just as real. And I'm spending time with Him, and I ought to go into it with this heart of just being in awe of His presence, and preparing myself and centering myself upon this thought that I'm about to do something that is a great, great privilege, and something that I should take very, very seriously. And so we prepare our hearts, we prepare our minds to do that. And there might be a lot of other things that we could do to prepare. Maybe you can think of a few. If you want to share, you can put it in the comments below. But the main point is that we are thinking ahead and preparing to spend time with the Lord, to spend intimate time with Him, fellowship with Him, and give Him, a portion of our day each and every day, so that we can draw closer to Him and have a deeper, more fuller relationship with Him. Well, with that, I do thank you guys for listening in. I hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.